The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is a midweek analysis for June 8th of 2022. Okay, let's start out with the Aussie yen pair. Alright, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I was looking at. So the last weekly short trade that formed was right here. And the last weekly long trade that formed was right here. And this long trade was slightly stronger than this weekly short trade, so the bias was long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit this week at this point right here. Now, moreover, on the weekly forecast, I was mentioning that I may perhaps take a short entry at these levels, depending on what happened on the lower time frames at the beginning of this week. However, I did not get a confirmation for a short entry. So let me just show you what that's about. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, initially, there was 1 hour long strong confirmation formed at this point right here that confirmed that weekly bias to be long. And then we got this strong move all the way up to these levels right here. And then last week on my forecast, I was mentioning this 4-hour hammer that formed right here. And when a higher time frame hammer forms in the opposing direction of the original bias, often price falls right back down to make strong opposing short strength. However, I was mentioning I will need to watch further price action this week to see if I could take a short entry. However, on Monday, we actually got another opposing hammer right here, actually in the long direction, which overrides this previous hammer formed right here. And so at this point, I decided not to take that short entry. And then price came right back up to hit that main weekly target, roughly at these levels right here. Okay, so at this point, the Aussie yen's bias is back to neutral for the main target for that weekly bias was hit. And so at this point, I'll be waiting for another weekly short trade to form and then measure the strength differential against the last weekly long trade to come up with a new weekly bias, whether long or short. Okay, so let's go on to the Euro-USD pair. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I'm looking at. So the last weekly short trade that formed was right here, while the last weekly long trade that formed was right here. Now this long trade was ever so slightly stronger than this short trade, so the weekly bias was long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And as you guys know, since the strength differential between this short trade and this long trade is very slight, I'm watching the lower time frames for confirmation of this long bias. Okay, so let me go ahead and explain what's happening on that lower confirmation. Let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, initially there may have been daily strong long confirmation from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. For there's a breakout and immediate break back in, showing normal short strength. However, price came right back up on the next candle, stop out that pivot high to create strong long strength. Now, if this confirmation is legitimate, that confirms that weekly bias to be long. However, the legitimacy of this confirmation, due to the pivots being too close to each other, is questionable in my opinion. Okay, but for the time being, since the lower time frames price action is confirming a long bias also, that weekly bias still does seem to be long. Okay, and moreover, on top of that weekly bias we have, there's actually a daily bias that's forming also. So let me explain that to you. Okay, so the last daily short trade that formed was right here, and the last daily long trade that formed was right here. And this daily long trade was stronger than this short trade, so the daily bias stated that price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Now, moreover, last week, there was actually another long trade that formed right here, and the strength differential between this new long trade and this last daily short trade is about even. So because there's a weekly and daily bias at this point, the euro-dollar pair is a very tricky pair to trade. However, typically, if the weekly bias is long and this daily bias is obviously long also, this is a great opportunity to take a long entry along with that weekly bias. For the stop loss can be placed at this daily long trades pivot low right here, while maintaining that weekly bias's target at this pivot high right here. So for example, if I enter a trade right now long at this point right here, that's a risk of this much right here, while the profit potential is very large in comparison. Okay, but that said, since the daily bias's strength differential between this short trade and long trade is pretty much even, I cannot take this setup. Alright, so let me just wrap this up for you. So although, like I mentioned earlier, this daily lower time frame confirmation of strong long strength that formed at this level right here, for the time being, I will be taking as legitimate. So if I could get a pullback all the way down to the 1.0448 levels around here, I will be taking a long entry. Again, with the stop loss at this pivot low and its main target at that weekly bias's main target, which is up here. Okay, however, that said, that is for the time being. And since this is a tricky pair to trade at the moment, if price does show further signs on the lower time frames that show that this daily long strength is not legitimate, I will not take this long entry. So we'll just see what happens on this one on the lower time frames to see whether or not it confirms this daily strong long strength that formed right here. Okay, and I'll keep you guys updated on the weekly forecast. Okay, so that's it for the midweek analysis. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, guys. And thanks for watching. Goodbye.